What's going on, guys? It is MurderInc. We are here with a Surge Deathblade guide. By the time you're done watching this video, whether it's your main or it's going to be an alt for you, you are going to have so much information. You can truly master this class here. I'm going to be going over everything you could possibly think of for this class, including the pros and cons of picking this engraving over the other one, being remaining energy. So with that being said, let's head right into it. So with that being said, we're going to get into the basics of this class. We have a death orb meter in the middle here. In every average circumstance, you're going to start off with it at 0. Point of this class is going to be to make sure it's always at 3, being full here. And you can do that by using abilities to gather that death orb meter. And once you're at 3, these are the effects you get, as you can see here. If it's just one orb, you get 10% attack speed, attack power, MP recovery, which is going to be mana. And then it just scales up to 2 and then 3 orbs. Another key point here is going to be the skill cooldowns here. So as you can probably imagine, you always want 3 full death orbs before hitting that Z ability. Now onto the engraving itself. What makes this such a cool engraving after you hit Z here? Instead of instantly activating it, you're going to use abilities here, and you're going to see we're getting stacks. We also have a nice indicator to the right of us here. And as we do that, we're going to make our final Z or our surge hit do tons and tons of damage, which is pretty much the main goal of playing this class overall. As we can see, 37.9 million damage. You'll love to see it. It gets even higher if you have a bard, if you use consumables like an androgen potion, all of that good stuff. You can be hitting some crazy numbers. So all in all, the engraving explanation is going to be really simple. That's pretty much it in a nutshell here. Now the question is, why would you make this? What are the pros? What are the cons? So first, let's talk about the pros of this class. It's extremely fast. As you can see, as we go through this rotation here, you're just moving very quickly. You have tons and tons of mobility here, and like I said, big numbers. Everyone always enjoys big numbers here. So outside of the rotation being very quick and it being a very fast-paced class, another pro that most people are going to agree with is how hard this class hits. Whether you're doing Descaluda, Nightfox Yoho, a Vulcan run, in the future we have Vicus, Kakusaden, and finally Belshazzar here, you're going to be hitting massive numbers as you improve your engravings as well as your gear quality. Another pro, and this is probably going to be rather biased, I think it's one of the most fun classes personally because of how fast paced it is and because of all the movement options you have. While all of these abilities are going to be damaging abilities, you have lots of flexibility as far as using them for movement tools here. One ability in particular is going to be Soul Absorber. If you're waiting outside of an AoE, you can charge it up, then head straight back in to reconnect to the boss. On top of that, you also have Blitz Rush here, where you can stand far away from the boss, and then give it a nice ranged attack, which also does significant damage. So now we're going to talk about the cons of the class, because just like every single class, there are going to be some drawbacks. One thing that you're going to notice, and you might have already noticed already, is going to be this class is rather difficult to play. I would say it's easy to play on a very beginner level, but if you really want to do a lot of damage and be consistent about it, you have to make sure you're always hitting that final Z ability. Now, if you've been playing this game for any duration of time, you know that bosses love to move around. And with this being a back attack modifier class, it's going to have a significant damage drop if you are missing that final Z onto the back here. So that is going to be one of the cons to this class. However, don't be discouraged. There are a lot of people saying it's not worth playing this class because of the difficulty of it. If you enjoy it and you think it's fun and you have a decent amount of playtime in this game, you will be good enough to do any content in this game, and the rewards are very high. A very skilled Deathblade is going to do an insane amount of damage, and if you're already maining one by now, you know that we're pretty much the kings of the MVP screen. Outside of the skill level, there really isn't another con to this class. The rotation's quite simple. The survivability of the Deathblade overall is about middle of the pack, so you don't have to worry about dying too often, assuming you are dodging mechanics here. And due to how versatile the Deathblade's rotation and kit is, even if the boss jumps away mid-rotation, you have plenty of tools to keep gathering stacks. So if the boss does jump away, and let's say you miss one of your abilities here, you can hop straight back to the boss, continue doing your rotation here, and you will still have a rather easy time in getting all the way back to 20 stacks. So now let's talk about these stats you are going to be looking for this class here. Specialization is going to be the #1 statistic for this class. As we can see right off the bat, surge skill damage plus 186%. Since that is going to be roughly 70 to 80% of our total damage, you can see why we are stacking specialization at all cost. Next we have blade art meter, skill cooldown reduction, awakening skill damage. As another additional benefit to having the specialization skill, our secondary skill is going to be crit rate, because let's be honest, if you are playing this class, you know it's absolutely terrible to go through your entire rotation, all your hard work getting all 20 of those stacks while following the boss, making sure it's not dodging anything that you have to offer here, and then you go and hit the boss and it does not crit. Even though I did crit there, you guys understand what I mean. So now that we went over the stats here, let's talk about the engravings. This is going to be one of those things where it does come down to preference. Of course, there's going to be a best here. Now, I do understand that I have 6 engravings here. When you are testing in Trixion, you will find out rather quickly that you're going to run out of mana, because this class just consumes mana like no other. We don't have any supports in here giving you the mana regen that they do give with their buffs. Also don't have the food that you would typically be using if you're in any type of progression format in this game here. So keeping that in mind, you can completely ignore max MP increase, giving me 30% additional MP, because that's not going to be relevant to what I'm trying to discuss here. So early on, you want to focus on getting Surge level 3 and Adrenaline level 3. These are going to be the two most important first engravings here. Why do I value Adrenaline over something like Ambush Master or Grudge? Both of these engravings will give you significantly more damage than Adrenaline. The reason why is what we just explained about the critting. If you're not going to be critting with this class, it's just a lot less fun to play overall, which is why I have this such a high priority. If you're in tier 1 or tier 2 and only have the option to have 2 level 3 engravings. Once you start moving on down the line to tier 3, this is when you start adding things like Ambush Master, or you can go with Grudge if you're comfortable taking additional damage once you start heading into that tier 3 threshold. So you can go Surge, Adrenaline, Grudge, or Surge, Adrenaline, Ambush Master. Adding the 4th engraving, I would definitely go with Grudge here. Now as far as the 5th engraving goes, this is completely up to the player. Some of them are going to be much more expensive than the others, so really quickly going to our engraving tool here. If you don't want to use Keen Blunt Weapon, which gives 50% crit damage, but your attacks also have a chance to deal 20% less damage overall, this goes back to the point of gambling to hit those really big numbers, which is why I do favor Keen Blunt Weapon, as well as many other players do, over the other options. You can run Increased Mass. It doesn't feel that terrible to have -10 attack speed, as long as you are using the proper rune setup, which I will show you guys next. And of course, Curse Stall is also going to be a viable 5th option in engraving, keeping in mind that getting a 5x3 setup is quite expensive right now, so Curse Stall might be out of most players' budgets, but if you can go for it, absolutely feel free to if you don't want to go with Keen Blunt Weapon. Outside of that, another fantastic and in my opinion highly underrated budget option is going to be Disrespect. Disrespect shines specifically on Vaultin, since some of the most crucial points to dealing damage to the Vaultin Legion commander is going to be when he's at 30% health or less, and you will see a significant increase in your damage. While it doesn't affect any content where the health is 100 to 70%, 36% additional damage is quite significant when those bosses are at 30% or lower. Outside of those 7 engraving options, I really wouldn't stray too much further unless you're looking for survivability. If you want to go with something like Ether Predator, if you choose to use Precise Dagger, you can. It will never be as good, and it might even be more expensive since other classes do value those engravings significantly higher than Blade. Now that we went over the engravings, let's talk about gems here. Surge Deathblade makes a fantastic alt because it's very cheap investment wise. The main gems you're going to want, of course, is going to be a Annihilation Surge gem. Since Surge is such a big part of our overall damage, you're going to want a cooldown gem for Maelstrom, and outside of that, everything else is secondary. So what's going to be a good threshold? I would say level 7 Maelstrom gem definitely helps you in making sure that you can do all of your rotations quite smoothly. However, you don't have to go level 7, you can absolutely get away with a level 6 gem, and as we can see here, I do have level 5 gems on everything else, mostly because of synergy with tripods, but eventually that's going to be on the radar for every single player. So recapping, the most important gems are going to be Surge damage, Blitz Rush damage, Soul Absorber damage, Maelstrom cooldown, then I would say wind cut cooldown, spin cutter cooldown, and then blitz rush cooldown are the other important ones. After that, you can pretty much pick and choose what you would like. I filled it with void strike cooldown as well as soul absorber cooldown. You can add earth cleaver damage for additional damage here. And you can also add void strike damage for another source of increased damage. However, those are going to be very small damage increases simply because surge is such a large portion of our damage overall. After that, for cards, you are going to want the Lost Wind Cliff card set, giving us an additional 7% crit rate. The other set to look for, of course, is going to be the rather long-term Light of Salvation set, which is probably going to take most players a year, if not longer, to get, which just transfers your damage to holy damage and scales very high from there. Moving on to the gear sets, if you are 1370 and on an Argos level, you are going to want to use a 5-set preordained. If you are then moving on to relic gear, this is where you're going to heavy focus Earth's entropy set here. As we can see, back and head modifiers increased by 55% on top of 70% crit damage. The damage you get from this 2-set alone pretty much makes your character explode from here. Even better, 4-set with 17% additional crit rate. As we know, we enjoy crit rate a lot. And the 6-set tops things off with 21 additional back attack modifiers and 7% damage to foes. Now the 2-set is acquirable from Vulcan, so if you're wondering why you can only get the 2-set right now, it's because we do have to wait until Vicus is released to get those final 4 pieces. Now there are going to be filler pieces you can use instead of the Argos sets, however it's not going to be a worthy investment in my opinion because the damage you get from the 2-set alone is so significant you can deal without the remaining 4 pieces until you do get to the Vicus stage where you can finish off the Earth's entropy set. Now that we covered most of the information about Surge Deathblade, let's talk about the most important part, which is going to be the rotation. Now there's going to be a perfect rotation, there's going to be a recommended rotation from me, and a side rotation that is most preferable in Korea right now. So first of all, let's talk about the perfect 20 stack rotation. How this is going to play out is you're going to activate your Z, use Spin Cutter, Wind Cut, Earth Cleaver, Soul Absorber, Maelstrom, Blitz Rush, you're going to tap Void Strike, and you're going to use Spin Cutter again, followed by Wind Cut, which is going to hit 20 stacks on the dot, then you're going to hit Z again. Now one problem you're going to notice when you're running this is there is an animation lock between activating your Z and trying to reactivate it again. One way to get around that is to simply move your character, and I will show you that in a faster speed so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So right there, as we just saw, there is a slight delay there. You can override that if you move your character either to the front, back, left, or right, doesn't matter which direction. So now I'm going to show it to you while I do move the character. So as we just saw there, it was rather instant as far as an activation goes, as opposed to letting us sit there and having to wait for the animation lock to end before being able to continue your rotation and reapply the 20 stacks. So as we just saw there and as I explained, that's going to be the most efficient 20 stack you can do on a Surge Deathblade. Now the reason why I have a separate preference to a 20 stack over this is because it's not always optimal to have to move to cancel that animation depending on the type of boss you're fighting. Sometimes you're standing in a very narrow spot to avoid mechanics because you can play with a quite risky playstyle when you are on a Surge Deathblade. So this is why I made one small adjustment to this rotation, and it's simply pre-casting Wind Cut, and I will show you that right here. So this rotation is going to be Wind Cut, Z, Spin Cutter, Wind Cut, Earth Cleaver, Soul Absorber, into Maelstrom, Blitz Rush, Void Tap, and you're going to be using Spin Cutter, hitting Z, Wind Cut, and activating Z again instantly because the Wind Cut animation is going to cancel out that animation lock as opposed to having to move. So now that I explained it, I will show it to you in full-time speed right here. Alright, so as we saw from that example, that is my personal preference as far as the variation goes. Technically there is a downside to it, it's rather hard to see, but the goal of a 20 stack is to start casting your surge at 18 to 19 stacks. Because it is capped at 0.4 seconds per stack. If not, you could just stack ridiculous abilities, get to 20 stacks very quickly, then unleash that damage. So there is a cap implemented into this game, so you do have to wait 0.4 seconds per stack to happen, which you can see if you overlap enough abilities that do generate stacks on the ground here. As we can see from what I'm doing now, I pretty much just used every ability and I'm still not at 20 stacks. If there was no internal cap, I would have hit it probably 4 or 5 abilities sooner. So as I was saying, the one downside to my preference of a stack is you're going to be 1 to 2 stacks behind, which isn't a significant damage loss. As you can see here from the training dummy, I do 4.48 million damage in 1 minute and 54 seconds. If I swap to the pitch perfect rotation, I would be doing around 4.59 million damage in the same time frame. So all things considered, what's happening by me using my preference is I am going to eventually end up losing one full surge in the rotation after 3, 4, or 5 minutes, but you're not going to notice it because no boss is going to stand perfectly still like Lumeris is. The next thing I want to talk about is something that's preferred and rather popular in Korea right now, which is going to be the 16 stack rotation. This rotation, as you can probably guess, you're going to release surge at 16 stacks, which is going to leave you with a incomplete death orb meter. Alright, so that rotation is going to look like activate Z, spin cutter, into wind cut, earth cleaver, soul absorber, then maelstrom, blitz rush, into spin cutter, activate Z here, which is going to be 16 stacks if you do it flawlessly, which as we can see isn't a full death meter. The fill here is going to be adding void tap with wind cut, then hit Z again. Now there are a few options you do have if you don't want to stack void strike with wind cut again. The reason why I add void strike and wind cut together is because some players are not going to have enough specialization. If you do prefer this rotation to fully max out the death orb meter based on the type of wealth runes you do in fact have. If you do have proper wealth runes, you can do a variation of this rotation, which is going to be activate Z, spin cutter, wind cut, earth cleaver, soul absorber, maelstrom, blitz rush, spin cutter, then you're going to cast wind cut, hit Z, use that void strike, and you will also be full meter once again to start everything all over. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why would players prefer this over something else? The answer is, over time, once again, you're going to be getting more surges per minute than the 20 stack rotation. If the fight duration is going to be long enough, it also lets you sit at the incomplete orb meter just in case the boss jumps away, to where you can simply run up to the boss, void tap it for full meter, and you're going to be back into your rotation. So those are going to be the 3 rotations that you can use to do maximum damage with a Surge Deathblade. The next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the runes I am using here. I have Bleed on Wind Cut, Wealth on the Void Strike since we're just tapping it, Overwhelm on Earth Cleaver, and then I am going to be a Galewind player here. I really enjoy Galewind. It really feels good to have lots of attack speed since we're not using the supercharged engraving here. It speeds things up significantly, and without this you will be generating more stacks due to the downtime in between using skills, which is going to lower your damage overall, but you're going to generate stacks quicker. So I have Galewind on Blitz Rush. I also have it on Spin Cutter. If you prefer to put the Rage rune on Spin Cutter, you can absolutely do that. I have Focus on Maelstrom. If you're running Vaultin Gate 1, I would highly recommend using Purify. It's like a free remove debuff. Gives you a 75% chance to remove that nasty bleed debuff from that. Then you can use Galewind or Protection on Dark Axle, and finally Galewind again on Soul Absorber. That's pretty much the beauty of running the 20 stack. You don't need wealth runes on anything because every single stack you get has to do with the amount of return you get in the death orb meters. 20 stacks is going to be the equivalent of a full 3 death orbs, and then after the recent patch they did change it so the lower stacks you do get, the significantly less amount of death orbs you are going to get from that, which was one of the significant nerfs to the Surge Deathblade, making sure you couldn't do the 12 or the 8 stack rotation, which just pumped out an insane amount of damage over time. The next thing I want to talk about is going to be tripods. We do have Wind Cut here. We're taking Quick Prep, Sustain, Enhancement, and Thick Sword Energy. Fixed art energy you don't need, it's not required, but it has very high quality of life because it does expand just in case your target starts to move. Then we have spin cutter with open weakness, quick prep, as well as triple spin here. Triple spin of course being very good because it adds a whole additional stack to it, making sure this rotation is quite possible. If you're playing Surge Deathblade and you don't have enough skill points, or you're not quite leveled up enough and don't have triple spin, your rotation is going to be a bit short on stacks, so keep that in mind and play around with things. Next we have Dark Axle with Swift Fingers, Tenacity, and High Axle. High Axle being one of the greatest abilities in the game because it allows you to jump over every single boss in this game. The next ability we do have is going to be Soul Absorber with Swift Fingers, Fist of Darkness, and Have. Next we have Earth Cleaver with Push. Push making this one of the best counters in the game. I would probably say the only classes that are ahead are going to be the Martial Artist classes who have extremely quick counter attacks, but Push on Earth Cleaver puts Deathblade right up there as well. We do also have Weak Point Detection here, and then Earth Explosion. If for some reason you do need a higher stagger level, you can sacrifice your counter and push and take concussion on this level 1 tripod. Next we do have Maelstrom here, Orb Control being one of the most important ones on top of Dark Order, which gives you a buff to your entire team, giving them move speed as well as attack speed. Once you get later on into the game, having this at level 5 is going to be extremely important because of the synergy it's going to give all of your party members, and it's one of the reasons why Deathblades, outside of their damage if you're Surge, are heavily sought after for most groups. Next we're going to have Blitz Rush. This is an interesting one because the main change to the rotations did occur with this ability right here. Vital hit point remains the same, however Dark Charge is a change here. Dark Charge is going to give you a stack per charge up. I can swap to Charge Enhancement very quickly, hit save, and show you what it looks like with Charge Enhancement. So this is what it's going to look with Charge Enhancement. As we can see, we gained 1 stack here. Now if we go here, swap over to Dark Charge, we can run up to the boss, hit our Blitz Rush again, and as we can see, 4 stacks total as opposed to 1 stack. Now where we do use Blitz Rush in the rotation, if you're thinking to yourself, isn't that going to overlap? The answer is yes. However, this rotation was made to be the most consistent, so you can use Maelstrom and Dark Charge in case the boss is moving, or if you do have to use your Blitz Rush from a distance here, you can afford to lose those stacks based on how many stacks you're generating from the other abilities in your kit. So after Dark Charge, of course, you're going to use Shadow Rush here. I've seen some players take Dual Blitz instead. Dual Blitz does in fact do more damage. One main problem with this, as you're going to see as I cast it here, is you leap into the boss, and instead of it being a ranged attack, it now becomes a melee attack. So if you're casting this and all of a sudden a deadly mechanic is about to spawn in front of you, you don't have time to animation cancel and dash away, which means you are stuck and you most likely will die. So with that being said, it's just better to have the Shadow Rush tripod here, whether you're fighting 1 target and you want the stacks on it, or multiple targets and you want to hit a separate target on top of the initial target that is standing right next to your main target. The last skill we're going to be talking about today is going to be Void Strike. For Void Strike, the level 1 is going to be heavily dependent on what you prefer. Taking Orb Control is going to be a very good failsafe, just in case you're not able to land 20 stacks all of the time. Having this significantly increases your Death Orb meter gain, although as we mentioned before, if you're running a 20 stack rotation, you won't need any Death Orb meter gain if you can sustain 20 stacks throughout the fight outside of your initial entrance to whatever encounter you are fighting, if you are starting with 0 Death Orbs at the start. So if you wanted to, you could swap to increase attack speed to make this even faster, although since you're just tapping it, it is much safer to stick with Orb Control. Next we do take Void Zone, because when you do tap this ability, it places a puddle. Each time the puddle takes damage, it's going to give you an additional stack. And finally, we do have Dark Dimension here. So those are the tripods, those are the skills being used. I know I did not talk about the Awakening here. Just in case you're curious about Flash Blink, the Awakening, and what it does, let's go ahead and burn all 3 of our Death Orbs and simulate an actual fight here. If you're running Adrenaline, it's going to start stacking based on skill usage. So usually the start of most fights are going to be pretty stationary. I like to Dark Axle in, giving me 1 stack, throw out the Wind Cut, then Spin Cut here, pop Maelstrom, then use Soul Absorber, straight into the Awakening, and as we can see, we have a full Death Orb meter, and then we can start our normal rotation on the back of the boss. So with that, Flash Blink gives you a super armor if you have to get out of danger quickly, and it also provides a very big punch if you can get the crits, which is why I highly recommend, if you're going to use this, make sure you have most of your stacks of adrenaline giving you as much crit rate as possible before using Flash Blink. Alright guys, that's going to conclude this video on the Surge Deathblade. Hopefully by now you have a very good understanding of the class. You're ready to start practicing, whether it's in Trixion, real battles, whatever you choose. One of the greatest things about this class is there's so much freedom as far as what you can do. While there is a set rotation, all you have to do is hit 20 stacks, unleash your Z, make sure it hits the target, and you are going to be doing above average DPS no matter what tier you're in. In the earlier tiers, it's very strong because the bosses are arguably a lot more stationary than in the later game. In the later game, that is when a lot more skill is going to be required out of the player to make sure they understand the mechanics very well. They know when to use their surge, they know when not to use their surge, and they understand all of the proper openings for building stacks optimally. So with that being said, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and I will see you all in my next video.